All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to unpack an academic paper that really digs into one of the most stubborn theories to come out of September 11th. And that's the idea that a third skyscraper, World Trade Center Building 7, didn't collapse because of fire, but because of a controlled demolition.
Now, to really get a handle on this theory, we're not going to start with the arguments or the witnesses. Nope, we're starting with the event itself, a massive 47-story steel-frame skyscraper that just collapsed late in the afternoon on 9/11. You have to understand, this single moment is the bedrock for everything else we're about to talk about.
And that moment gives rise to the one question that has just echoed for years. How in the world does a modern skyscraper like this, one that wasn't even hit by a plane, fall so perfectly right down into its own footprint?
So let's just stick to the facts for a second, the stuff nobody disputes. At 5:20 in the evening, hours after the Twin Towers were gone, WTC7 came down. The why and the how, well, that's what this whole analysis is really about.
Okay, so let's get into the first pillar of the theory that the source article lays out, and that's the motive, the big why. According to this whole narrative, the building's collapse wasn't some tragic accident in all the chaos of that day. It was supposedly part of a carefully planned false flag operation. You've probably heard that term, false flag, but what does it actually mean? Well, think of it like this. It's an attack carried out by one group, but specifically designed to look like somebody else did it. For this theory, the claim is that the real attackers weren't Al-Qaeda, but some group on the inside who then pointed the finger outward to kickstart a much bigger plan.
And what was that bigger plan, that supposed goal? The source breaks it down into this huge three-stage geopolitical strategy. Step 1, create the perfect excuse to bomb nations in the Middle East. Step 2, break those nations apart, creating huge populations of stateless people. And finally, Step 3, move in to colonize the whole region for its land and, of course, its resources. It's laid out as this really long-term strategic plan.
So, okay, once the motive is laid out, the theory pivots to its technical heart, the how. This part of the argument isn't about geopolitics anymore. It's all about physics, engineering, and what happened to that building.
And this is where you really see the two narratives clash. On one side, you've got the official explanation. It says that debris from the North Tower started fires. Those fires weakened the steel, and the building suffered a progressive collapse. But the theory says, no way. It argues that the only thing that could cause that kind of total, symmetrical failure was pre-planted explosives.
People who back this theory really zero in on a few key pieces of physical evidence. First, they point to how symmetrical the collapse was. It fell straight down. Second, the speed of it all. They say it fell at nearly free-fall acceleration, which would mean there was almost no resistance from the floors below. And third, they talk about squibs. You know those little puffs of dust and debris shooting out sideways from the building as it fell, which they argue are telltale signs of explosions. The core of their argument is simple. Fire has never, ever caused a steel-framed skyscraper to collapse like this.
But it's not all about the physics. The theory's third pillar is all about the human element. It's about key witnesses and what they say they saw and heard.
The first witness we need to talk about is Susan Lindauer. Now, as the source material points out, she wasn't just anybody. She was a journalist and, critically, a former CIA asset. So her testimony is framed as coming from someone who was on the inside.
According to the paper, Lindauer made some pretty incredible claims. She said she knew about the attacks beforehand and that there was a massive cover-up. But here's the kicker. She specifically claimed that a plane was actually supposed to hit WTC7 that day, but the pilot refused, thwarted the plan, and ended up in jail. This detail is used to suggest why a demolition might have been the backup plan.
Now, the second key witness is a completely different kind of person. Meet Barry Jennings. He wasn't some intelligence operative. He was a regular city employee who just happened to be inside World Trade Center 7 on the morning of September 11th.
What makes Jennings' account so critical to this theory is the timing. He said he heard and felt massive explosions inside WTC7 before either of the Twin Towers had even come down. His own words were that the entire floor beneath my feet was blown up. That's presented as direct, first-hand evidence that charges had already been planted and were going off early.
So when you take all three of these pillars, the alleged motive, the technical arguments about the collapse, and these powerful witness statements, and you put them all together, you get the theory's grand conclusion. It's a completely alternative story for 9/11 and everything that came after.
As the paper sums it up, the ultimate goal of this supposed operation was to use 9/11 as the perfect excuse. An excuse to start wars, create stateless populations, colonize the Middle East for oil and other resources, and then use all that to build up military might for a final showdown with China. In this worldview, 9/11 wasn't the end of something. It was just the beginning.
And that kind of leaves us here. This academic paper walks through a pretty comprehensive story, piece by piece. Now, whether you buy into it or dismiss it completely, it does make you ask a really interesting question. What is it about a story that seems to explain everything? What's the power in a narrative that connects every single dot from one building falling in New York to decades of global conflict?